Welcome back, snow lovers, and a happy new year. 2026 has finally delivered the goods for some, with parts of eastern Switzerland and northern Austria seeing their first measurable snowfalls in nearly a month. Widely, places have recorded around 10 to 20 centimetres, and a few isolated pockets they've seen over 30 centimetres of snow. This was, of course, incredibly welcome for those who have received it, and has vastly improved the on-piste conditions. There's even given a little bit of powder to be found for those who are lucky, although on the whole, still much more is needed to actually make good off-piste conditions again. But unfortunately, most of us are still waiting our turn, with the wider Northern Alps as a whole at best seeing a cosmetic dusting, or indeed seeing nothing at all. But finally, that is about to change. The Atlantic is finally about to make its presence felt again, with a big storm coming down from the northwest for the first time in over a month. More on that in a bit, but for now, it's been incredibly cold so far this week. The polar Arctic air, which has been slowly coming down across Europe, has finally made its way all the way across the Alps and has truly embedded itself in our region. Temperatures in the deep alpine valleys have been plummeting to -15 or less overnight, and even in the peak of the afternoon, not been getting up above about -5. Up on the mountain, it's consistently been around about -10, if not colder, up at 2,000 metres. And at really high altitude, temperatures have been dropping below -20. Combine that with the wind chill and the feels like factor, temperatures have been falling to as low as -40 on some of the highest lifts in the Alps, such as the Guide Midi and the Kleine Matterhorn. And these are the kind of temperatures which are very rarely felt this far south in Europe these days. So we really are in a deep, deep cold air mass right now, something which has come as a complete shock to the system after the mild December that we've been experiencing previously. And this is not without consequences. A friend of mine received mild frostbite in her finger while mountaineering recently, and I've heard news from the team at Snow Camps Europe that some of their instructors instructing up on the Kitzsteinhorn Glacier have got frostbite in their feet. Because of course, while you're instructing, you're not generating much body heat, and while ski boots may well be incredibly well insulated, they're also quite restricting and can restrict blood flow in and out your feet. So if you are out here skiing in these kind of temperatures, it's incredibly important to remember to loosen your boots every now and again and keep wiggling those toes. Otherwise, frostbite can happen, even to those who are accustomed to the cold and used to skiing in these temperatures. And it's been even colder in the Jura, with La Bravine in the Swiss part of the Jura dropping to a nighttime low of -30.3 degrees and only reaching a daytime high of -18, so that is absolutely frigid. Another consequence of the deep cold, along with the prolonged high pressure that we've been experiencing so far this year, is that of pollution in the deep alpine valleys. During winter, under periods of high pressure, the pollution which is formed in deep, densely populated alpine valleys becomes trapped. It can't escape, and it just builds and builds and builds. Already this season, in my local area of the Arve Valley, we've experienced one orange health warning for the pollution levels just before the new year. That was briefly lifted as the weak weather front moved down throughout the 2nd, 3rd and 4th of January. We've now gone back into orange health warning again, and you can really notice it. You can literally taste the pollution in the air. It's really unpleasant at the moment. And this won't just be an isolated problem in my corner of the Alps. Any of the deep, densely populated valleys in the Alps will suffer the same thing under high pressure, unfortunately. Most people will associate going on an alpine holiday with the fresh mountain air, but the reality is, unfortunately, often in winter, the air quality in some of the alpine valleys can be worse than in parts of the developing world. And it can be bad enough to affect your health. The very young, the very old, and those who are susceptible to having breathing issues can really suffer at these times. But even me, I'm relatively young, I'm fit, I'm healthy. I was feeling queasy just walking 500 metres down the road to the bakery earlier today. That's how bad it can be. But thankfully, with the weather that is approaching later this week, not only is it finally going to bring some snow, but it's also going to stir up the soupy polluted air and bring some fresh air to the bottom of the valleys. So it is indeed very, very welcome. It seems that so far in 2026, every corner of France, except the Alps, has experienced some decent snowfalls, with snow lying on the beaches of both northern and western France, and even in the heart of Paris, where it's ground to halt after 5 to 10 centimetres of snow fell the other day, creating the longest traffic jam in French history of over 1,000 kilometres. So it's not just the UK which is so ill prepared for a tiny dusting of snow. The French capital is just as susceptible too. And speaking of the UK, it seems that some of the best skiing to be found anywhere in Europe right now can be found in northern Scotland, with powder laps being had right the way down to sea level. Sadly, higher up and above the tree line in the Scottish ski centres, and a lot of that snow had just been blowing away in the strong northerly winds. Although that has finally started to change over the last day or so, as the winds have swung round towards the west, meaning ski centres have all caught much more snow over the last day than they had previously. So things finally look to be shaping up now for the start of the ski season in Scotland proper. Parts of Eastern Europe have also been seeing a good dump of snowfall this week, with the Balkans in particular widely seeing 50 to 60 centimetres of snow at all elevations. And some of this snowfall has also made its way across to the Carpathians and Tatras, so some of the Romanian and Bulgarian ski centres have also received a good dump of snow. Back to the Alps, and with the phenomenal snowfall totals that they received down in the far southwest over the Christmas period, it was only a matter of time before that turned deadly. And that was the case, unfortunately, on the 2nd of January, with 3 separate avalanches across Italy's Piedmont region, resulting in 2 fatalities and 2 other serious injuries. And just like those who were caught out in the avalanches in Savoie on Boxing Day, most, if not all of these people were fully equipped, and indeed some of them are mountain professionals. So even the experts can get it wrong, unfortunately. And once again, no amount of equipment is an invincibility shield. The only way to truly ensure that you don't get killed by an avalanche is not to get avalanched in the first place. So decision making is crucial. And sadly, there has also been another fatality involving a skier colliding with a rock in the Savoie region of France this week. And again, this was a skier who was wearing a helmet. They were properly equipped, but helmets are not designed to save you with a full-on head-on collision into a rock or tree. They are also not invincibility shields. The reality is, they are only rated to save you into collisions up to around about 20 miles an hour. Many people will be skiing faster than 20 miles an hour all the time. So, while they do prevent many serious injuries every day and are well worth wearing, they are not infallible. And especially with the very low tide conditions in the off-piste at the moment, you really do need to be careful. So, as mentioned, we are finally set to see our first major storm come down from the northwest of the season, and we're near enough to the event now that I can say with a degree of certainty that this will happen. Of course, there still are things to play for in terms of just how much snow we're going to get and where's going to get that snow, but we can say with a high degree of certainty that there is a major storm coming down from the northwest, which is going to bring decent snowfalls to much of the northern and western Alps. Current forecast models are predicting the biggest dumps of snow to be had in the Mont Blanc region, which is of course great news for me. Snowfall totals vary, but it's widely expected that we'll see around about a metre of snow at altitude in the Mont Blanc Massif. And over a much wider area, we can expect around 50 to 60 centimetres of snow to fall down to even modest elevations. Some parts may even see significant snowfalls down to valley level. But there is also the possibility of some freezing rain, which is a phenomenon we won't often see in Europe. It's much more prevalent in North America. But with this storm, freezing levels are set to be rising slightly. It's bringing in some slightly less cold air. It still is cold air, but compared to what we have now, it is much less cold. Currently, freezing levels are down at sea level. It is absolutely Baltic. But current forecasts are suggesting that in places, freezing levels are going to go up to around about 1500, maybe even 1800 metres. Now, if that happens, with the cold air deeply entrenched in the valleys, much of the ground incredibly well frozen, really cold, as the slightly warmer air moves in over the top, if the snow falling out of the sky happens to melt while it passes through the slightly warmer air, it could well then freeze again in contact with the ground. That can result in incredibly icy surfaces on roads, even those which are treated, and it has been known to bring down power cables, trees and all sorts as well. But this is just a hunch on my part. It could well not happen at all. We might just get a bit of wet snow down in the valley, or equally, it might not warm up at all, and we might get deep cold snow all the way down to the valley level. That would be nice. Virtually all of the Alps look set to see some snow over the coming days, with the exception of perhaps the far southwest, Piedmont in Italy, but they've got enough already. They've had their turn. It's our turn now. But with this being an Atlantic depression coming down from the northwest, that does mean that the bulk of the snowfall is going to fall either north or west of the main Alpine divide. So parts of Italy, especially the Dolomites, will still see relatively little, unfortunately. But with the cold weather that we have had recently, they should at the very least have finally been able to get on top of their snowmaking ahead of the Winter Olympics. So hopefully now most of what they need is already there. They've already been able to build the jumps, build the trails, etc. And this fresh snow that is coming, which will largely just be a cosmetic dusting, will at least make everything look white and wintry again. The snow is set to start falling at some point throughout Wednesday night or Thursday morning, initially fairly light, but then from Thursday night onwards is when the real intense snow should start, and that will continue pretty much uninterrupted throughout Friday and into Saturday as well. By which point, freezing levels will have plummeted once again, and we should see snow down to even the lowest valleys by Saturday. Beyond that, of course, there's still a lot to play for, and anything could happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But at the moment, at least, the forecast models are suggesting that the bulk of Europe is set to stay cold throughout much of January. As to whether there'll be any meaningful snowfall or not, who knows. But especially if fronts approach in from the west, they bump into the cold air, we could well see more significant snowfall throughout the rest of January as well. Or equally, the mild air may end up winning out, at least in the Western Alps again, and we end up with rain. But we shall just have to see. But at the very least, this snowfall event should go some way to resetting our season and putting us back on track. We've still got a long way to go, and we still need a lot more snow. But thankfully, this should patch up some of the base which is currently missing across much of the Northern and Western Alps. I won't give you a roundup of snow depths this week, because with the exception of those parts which I've already mentioned of eastern Switzerland and northern Austria, nothing has changed. So there's nothing new to say. But even though snow depths and snow totals haven't really changed in many areas, and in those parts of the eastern and northern Alps which have received a dusting of snow, with the really cold temperatures we've been having, and the reduced traffic now that the main school holidays are over, a lot of the piste have vastly improved since you last heard from me. So even though the actual snow depths haven't really changed, the quality of the piste in some of those resorts in Austria and Switzerland, for example, have improved a lot. The team at Snow Camps Europe are reporting lovely squeaky snow on the piste in and around Zellemzee and Kaprun. So even though they only received a few centimetres of snow over the last week, the piste there have improved massively. And down in the Via Latia, it's no change. It's stayed cold down there, but they've received no new snowfall. So most of the snow that was already there has now been skied out. On-piste conditions are broadly speaking great, but there's been no fresh in the last week down there. And here in Chamonix, they've had some of the snow cannons back on and patched up some of the lower runs, which is not something you see very often midway through the season. They usually turn their snow cannons on for a week at most, in late November or early December, and that's it, they just leave it at that. But we've been so much in need of snow this season, they've actually resorted to turning the snow cannons back on, which does mean now that some of the lower pistes are skiable again, which have previously been broken. So that's it for this week. Time for me to go and dig up my powder skis again, which have been sat collecting dust for the whole of December. A big thanks once again to the team at Snow Camps Europe and also Salzy Online. Go give their channel some love too and check out their snow reports. If you're looking for detail around the Kaprun and Zellemzee area, then check out Snow Camps Europe. And for the Via Latia, check out Salzy Online. They produce excellent videos too. And next time you hear from me, hopefully I'll have my fill of powder. Finally.